everyone, and welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show, the show where you can talk to some trans people and you can ask us whatever questions you like. You can call in and you can just ask, what's my favorite flavor of ice cream, if you really want, but that would be a complete waste of everyone's time. Or you could ask any question you've ever thought about asking to a trans people, but maybe you've been too embarrassed. This week, you can talk to me, the very grumpy today, Katy Montgomerie, or the amazing
student Dr. Ben, who's only a student for 27 more days, and then I rebrand. So if you're just now seeing me for the first time, don't get used to this name because it's going to change.
He's going to change his name to Murderer Dr. Ben because he's going to stop being a student and start being a full-time murderer.
But just wait, just wait for somebody to say, well, your name was originally student Dr. Ben, and you can't change your name because that's too hard to relearn somebody's new name. Yeah, you're biologically a student forever, and you cannot ever change your name. I'm expecting arguments like that. Let's go.
You've got student chromosomes, Ben. You can't just choose who you are. Anyway, hey, how are you other than your countdown? Has your week been good? I'm setting you up so I can then complain about mine, so.
Well, because I'm going to complain too. Yeah, medical education is rough. The field is toxic in a lot of ways, and I'm exhausted, and I have a lot of imposter syndrome, and that's kind of, the rest of my life. But yeah, how are you, Katy?
Well, I actually had a good week. It was my birthday on Wednesday, which was yesterday. And in fact, I got this from my sister-in-law, which is really cool. It's a hand-embroidered... I don't know if it's going to focus. How cool is that? It's like a little handmade... I'm going to wear it. I don't know if it's like an everyday necklace kind of thing, but it's pretty cool. And I'm going to wear it on this show, assuming that I can sort out my hair and headphones. Well, maybe I'll do it in a sec when I stopped explaining. But yeah, so that was okay. But then, I don't know, lots of things just kind of bullshit, stressful times. I've not slept enough. And then just before the show went live, I had a mic problem, which was entirely my fault, but I was blaming on everyone else. And it pitch shifted my voice down. I don't know if anyone saw like a recent episode of another show that I was on where my voice was just like an octave lower. And obviously, that's not fun for anyone, but I feel like it's especially bad for trans women to get their voices artificially pitched down. And it's quite upsetting, and the comments are really horrible. Hopefully, it's resolved software-wise, and hopefully the other videos will be resolved. But that has actually left me feeling a lot more stressed than I thought it should do. I guess that's the fun of dysphoria, is it's very irrational and horrible. But yeah, other than that, I mean, doing all right. Surviving.
Surviving.
But yeah. So the first thing that we usually do on this show is, other than hear about our pointless, boring weeks, is we read out some poll questions. So every week we ask a poll question and we review the answers from last week's question. So I'm not really sure what either of these questions are, so they're both going to be a surprise to me, which is saying, Ben, would you like to read out the first one or the second one?
I'll take the first one because I've been itching to talk about this one. Yeah. So the topic was, do you think gender dysphoria is a mental illness? And 86% of you said, no, I agree with WHO. And 14% said, yes, I oppose the experts. And of course, these are going to be loaded questions because we want people to engage, right? So it's a lot more nuanced than this. And I do engage in a lot of discussions about this particular topic, not just with gender dysphoria, but with many other categories of really anything that's not the norm, anything outside of the norm. We have this discussion about medicalization, and there's the concept of, on one hand, we don't want to pathologize people who have certain variations of normal. We don't want to say that somebody is diseased because they're not. They don't have the average traits that the majority of the population has. But on the other hand, if those people need certain accommodations, then you kind of have to make it a medical issue in order to justify the accommodation. So like you see this a lot as well with neurodivergent people, like people with ADHD. If you're going to be sitting in a classroom, a lot of times schools require documentation that you have this, so that you can, number one, have your medication given to you while you're at school, and also so that if you need extra services or extra time to take an exam or something, you have documentation. And so in order to get that to go through, especially with our insurance system, you need to label it as a medical diagnosis. Is having ADHD a disease? Not really. It's a variation of normal, just like being trans is a variation of normal. But if you're going to say that trans people require an accommodation in the form of HRT, puberty blockers, if they need surgery, then that is a medical therapy. So how do we justify giving a medical therapy for something that is not medical? And that's the issue we have here. So gender dysphoria is not a mental illness. It does not meet criteria, even like being trans in general does not meet criteria of a mental illness. And I have a whole soapbox about why that's the case. But gender dysphoria itself is a symptom. I would say it is a symptom of not meeting societal norms, and not meeting like your body, not meeting what your brain views how your body should be. But itself is not a mental illness. And I think kind of the biggest reason I've seen for why it isn't is that when you talk about a mental illness, the distress is in the brain, and when you correct everything externally, the distress still remains in the brain. Whereas with gender dysphoria, you see that it's an external thing. So even if your body is external to the brain, and if society is external to the brain, if you correct the body, and you correct the societal expectations, and you engage with somebody as their gender, then the distress goes away. So the distress does not remain in the brain upon fixing external factors. So that's kind of the biggest reason, but this is a very nuanced discussion. So the question is, I guess, how much do we allow for medicalization of gender dysphoria to allow people to get medical therapy, or do we just abandon that altogether? And I think there's a sweet middle spot that we need to get where we understand that it's not a mental illness, but we have this documentation set in place to provide accommodation. I know that was a long rant.
There's a long answer, but I think it's important to, it's good to hear the doctor side. And I think what you've done here is you've answered the question properly, and how a doctor would, by looking at the facts and the pros and cons and stuff. But so I can't do that because I'm not a doctor, but what I can do is address it from the point of view, like more of an activist perspective. Not saying you're not doing that too, but when people say being trans is a mental illness, but 99 times out of 100, what they're actually saying is, I think you are delusional, that you don't have any grip on reality, and I don't think you should be in control of your life. And so when they say mental illness, so depression is a mental illness, but they wouldn't say to someone who is depressed, oh, you shouldn't be able to have control over your own body, you should be sterilized, you should be banned from public spaces, you shouldn't be allowed to have a family. Because when they acknowledge that depression is a mental illness, what they mean there is, oh yeah, someone is unwell, which is what mental illness really means. But when people use it in this kind of derogatory way, what they're really saying is like, you're crazy, you're insane, you should be locked up, you're not fit to be in society, which is already kind of ableist garbage, but that is what they're saying. And so when we have this kind of categorization of, oh, is gender dysphoria a mental illness? I agree, it isn't one. Like, that's what the experts are saying. But it doesn't really matter to me, the label, because what matters to me is that we know what the best thing for trans people is, which is transition. And we know what the best thing for treating trans people in society is like everyone else, normally not being a fucking dickhead. And you can call it whatever you want. I mean, what does it matter? I mean, yeah, we've got the problems of like the realities of insurance and stuff, but I mean, that's just a man-made problem anyway. It's just all rubbish. So, I mean, the reality is, however we do it, whatever we call it, whatever boxes we put people in, whatever happens, the best thing to do is allow trans people to have free healthcare and allow everyone to have free healthcare, which includes transition. and stop being a prick to people who are different to you, and then the whole world will be a better place. So usually when someone says that, they're not interested in a discussion with a doctor about what a mental illness counts as, even though you are totally right. What they really want to do is just say, I think you should have healthcare taken away from you, you should be put through conversion therapy and tortured and then locked up. And so that's why it's that's also why when this question was suggested in our little group chat, I was like, I don't want a straight yes no, because then we're baiting the I hate these kind of like, oh, should trans people have rights, like questions people ask on Twitter, and then they get like, some right-wing shithead picks it up with 100,000 followers, quote tweets it, and then they get 32,000 votes saying no, and then 6 votes saying yes, and then like, what does that prove? All that does is demoralize some trans people who see it. And I didn't want this channel to be like that. So it's always important to just remind people this isn't like an opinion, really. Like, this is an opinion of doctors and experts. But like, your opinion on what this counts as is literally worthless to me. And it should be worthless to society. It shouldn't affect how we treat people. I don't care whether you think gender dysphoria is a mental illness, because you're not a doctor. So fuck off. That's not to you, Ben. I know. Oh, you're not a student doctor. So anyway,
I'll fuck off in about 27 days.
Man, I am feeling a grump today. I'm sorry, everyone, who I get grumpy out on the calls. Next question, please. So this is this week's question, which you can vote right now if you go to the community page of our YouTube channel on the line. I mentioned this the other day on Twitter, and I got like 10 people replying like, you can do polls on Twitter, YouTube. Like, I didn't know there was, and go to the community tab, and they were like, there's a community tab? So you can go and engage, you can go and click like and write a little comment and boost our algorithms, because this is your favorite show, maybe, or your least favorite show. And anyway, this week's question is, if fascists show up to support your political rally, should you rethink your entire life? Ben, if you were protesting for like mayonnaise rights or whatever you do in your spare time, and like the people flipping doing Hail Hitler's turned up, would you think that maybe I'd been right all along? Would it even maybe just crush your mind a little bit?
So so because I think we all know what this poll is in reference to, and if you don't, well, this is a fun little story. But if I was if I was campaigning for a idea or organization or whatever, and some people like this showed up and supported my side, first of all, I would tell them to leave and that they're not welcome there. And secondly, if that did happen, I would definitely question why. What particular point brought them to be on my side, and maybe I need to rethink my position. I don't know, rethink your entire life, possibly at that point, depending on how extreme the viewpoint I had was. If it's mayonnaise based and these people showed up in support of mayonnaise, I don't think I'd rethink my entire life because some right-wing extremists also agreed that they liked mayonnaise. I don't know if I would, if that's the point, I would give up on mayonnaise for.
This is, I guess my little pointless jab at mayonnaise there kind of leads into the classic argument, one of the arguments against this. When this happens, you'll have a gender critical or some other kind of person who's trying to pose themselves as a centrist or a left-wing person will turn up to oppose trans rights, and then the Nazis show up in support of them. And their usual responses are, I didn't invite them, I don't agree with Nazis, and Hitler was a vegetarian. I think they're the three arguments we get here.
What?
I will go through those. So there's the I didn't invite them, and I think that's completely immaterial. Like, if you invited them, yes, that would be slightly worse. But these people saw what you were saying, and they thought, this idea is for me. I agree with this. This is part of my worldview. And they turned up. And you could say, oh, well, a Nazi could turn up to anything. Yeah, we could have, a rally about animal rights, and maybe a Nazi would show up because they just also happen to like dogs. And that's the Hitler is a vegetarian argument. I'll just get onto. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I might as well get onto it now. So the reason I call it the Hitler is a vegetarian argument is because people often do this. You say something like, oh, the Nazis hated trans people, they hated gay people. So someone doing that today is at least not in disagreement with Nazis. Like this rally, you know, if the Nazis show up to support you, they at least don't disagree with you, because they would never show up to support a rally I was part of. Like, they don't like anything I like. Our entire worldviews are in direct conflict. They're going to oppose me for being trans, but also for being a feminist, for being pro-gay rights, for racial equality. You know, anything I'd actually go to a rally for, they wouldn't show up. So we're in conflict and you're not. But then they say something like, oh, well, Hitler was a vegetarian. Just because there's Nazis showing up to a pro-puppies rights rally, that doesn't mean that liking puppies is a Nazi position. And just because Hitler was a vegetarian, that doesn't mean vegetarianism is morally aligned with Nazism. And that is true, but it's not a good counter-argument for the actual argument we're making. I'm not saying, oh, well, just because something a Nazi does is something you do, that you must be, you're part of the same worldview, or you're a Nazi too. They tie their shoes, so you tie your shoes, so therefore you're both Nazis. What I'm saying is that Nazism has a specific set of beliefs that belong to, like, a core to being a Nazi. Being a vegetarian is not one. There's nothing that unites Nazis over vegetarianism. It's not a key part of their worldview. Their worldview is strict hierarchies, like patriarchy and racism, to create this kind of authoritarian, nationalist, like, bullshit. Like, that's, you know, I'm sure you could go to Wikipedia or go and ask a real historian for a better definition of fascism and Nazi. But being a vegetarian is not part of it, and neither is supporting the rights of puppies. However, opposing trans rights is absolutely part of it. I mean, historically, we can just see that from all of the fascist governments we've ever had, but like worldwide. But also, patriarchy is, you know, enforcing people into strict boxes based on their genitals, making sure they fill certain roles in society, stopping anyone who deviates from that from having a family, and just trying to wipe them out. You know, calling to eradicate trans people, for example. And that is a key part of Nazism. I mean, for sure, it's not their number one belief, but you know, it is a part of it. It's a part of Nazism in a way that vegetarianism isn't. And when you're part of a movement like Gender Critical, which is also anti-trans, like it's trans eliminationist, the like average gender critical position, wanting to create a world without trans people. That's what I mean when I say that. But it has no other views. Like, Gender Critical it's a single issue movement. There are some gender critical people who are vegetarians, and there are some who are not. There are some who like puppies, and there are some who don't. And even there are, with other political views, like there are some gender critical people who are racists and some who aren't. There might be some kind of, you know, correlation, but it's not a key part of gender criticalism. Hating trans people is, and it also is for Nazism. So yeah, that's the Hitler was a vegetarian argument. Oh, and the last one is, I don't agree with Nazism. It's like the same thing in reverse. Like, I'm not calling all gender critical people Nazis at all. I'm not calling every transphobe a Nazi at all. But every single Nazi is pro-gender critical and is a transphobe. And that's the important direction that we're pointing out when stuff like this happens. I mean, yeah, I think it'd be ridiculous to suggest that all transphobes or all gender critical people were Nazis. I mean, this is factually false. We can just see that. But people like to try and straw man that as being my argument because it's much easier. It's very easy to dismiss. You're like, oh yeah, Katie's calling every single person who disagrees with her a Nazi. And that's just not the position I'm taking. Anyway, go vote. If you would like to comment on anything in the show, obviously you can call in, though currently we have full lines, so you will have to wait until the end of a call and try and sneak in. But also, you could, if you wanted, send a super chat, and then me and Ben will have to read them out at the end. And we're not going to do accents, because we've tried that and it went horribly badly.
You didn't like my squeaky voice? I used that for a D&D campaign once. It was funny.
Well, apparently I had a really low voice. So anyway, let's get into some calls. Let's start with
Pick your
are you
favorite.
up for starting? Yeah, I'm just Trying to. Let's start with School 6. So we're going to talk to Spencer in Germany. I would like to talk about they, them pronouns, and they feel dehumanizing. Spencer, why do they feel dehumanizing to you?
Well, thanks for taking my call, Katie. Happy birthday for yesterday. And Ben,
thank you.
Both of you, it's a genuine honor to speak to you. I've been watching you guys for such a long time and first-time caller, so thank you. I realize this is very much my issue and not anyone else's. But when I first started to look at media that is trans positive and not quote unquote taking both sides or anything, I started to get exposed to the they them pronouns, and it's always felt like it's close to calling someone it. And I know that's not true, and perhaps the two of you are not the best people to speak to because of your pronouns being she, her, and he, him, and it's not there. But I kind of want to understand what it means to somebody for them to say, okay, I identify as they, them pronouns or any variation thereof. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Right. So I think that it might just be kind of a quirk of the English language to an extent, in that we didn't have, like some languages have multiple genders and some languages just have one. So for example, Finnish, they don't have gendered pronouns. So whether it's a man or a woman or a non-binary person you're talking about, you can just use the same pronoun in all cases. And then there are some languages like German, which naturally has 3 genders. English doesn't really have any genders apart from 4 pronouns. And we already have this kind of neutral pronoun in existence. I mean, previously in the development of the English language, we had sort of different pronouns, and they've slowly changed meaning over times. But when in a sentence, like before you learn anything about trans people, whenever that was, 10 years ago or something, there might have been a situation where someone said like, oh, I'm going to go and pick up my kid from school. And then you might say, oh, how old are they? And I think that would be quite natural. I think that's the way that I would have talked for my entire life. And then they might say, oh, she's 7. And then you'd be like, oh, okay, now I have a new piece of information. Or, oh, he's 12 or whatever. But you would have said they anyway. And so I think when people were, trying to understand and come up with ways to talk about themselves and describe themselves, and they're like, you know what, I don't feel like the box of man or the box of woman fits who I am. I don't have a word for this. And that's kind of why we've ended up with non-binary, which, is I don't know, this is as a binary trans person saying this, so all the non-binary people can absolutely tell me to fuck off. But I feel like non-binary probably is, it feels like a word that we've kind of chosen not, like man and woman, we can have as like, I don't know how best to explain this, but there's almost like we're saying like, oh, we're not one of those things, so we just come up with a word to mean something else rather than having its own word created for that specific purpose. And I do wonder if we will eventually come up with new words to describe non-binary people, rather than just kind of saying, oh, I'm a person who's not in this box, because I mean, really, we don't want to create a world where the box is anyway, full stop. I didn't explain that very well, but anyway, where I'm going with this is, there are people who have said, oh, well, I should be able to make up my own pronouns that aren't gendered. And, people have done that. And you see people whose pronouns are like they or ze or something like that. The difficulty is that, well, lots of people are very offended by that. So you already have to deal with all the dickheads. But people who aren't offended by it, who just want to try, they are so used to saying the 3 sort of sets of pronouns we have, which are he, him, she, her, and they, them, that is more difficult to get them to like effortlessly use them. And absolutely, in theory, we should be able to just come up with any kind of thing. I mean, language we've just totally made up. And if we all have a shared understanding, then, really anyone can use any words for anything. But the reality is that we kind of, in English, already have a shared understanding that they is a kind of gender neutral pronoun. So it's just easiest to go with. And maybe some non-binary people disagree and say, even in a world where I could make up any pronouns at all, I would still pick they. And that's, totally valid. That's totally fine. But I do think maybe if it was easy to make up your own pronouns, or if there was an already widely accepted gender-neutral singular pronoun, as well as they, like that was equally as accepted, maybe more people would pick that. So I don't know. I just on your point about it being like it, before I hand over to Ben, I do think it's a little bit different. I think that if you said, I go to pick up my kid from school and someone said, how old is it? You might be like, she is 7. Sometimes people call other people's dogs it, and people get leery about that. So, yeah, I think it is a little different, but I do understand that maybe for some people initially it feels like some kind of in between he, him, she, her, and it. But I guess I would just say that like singular they is older than singular you historically. So get with the times,
Yeah, that's actually that's a funny thing that I usually go to when people get so angry about pronouns. Is like, so when are you going to bring back thou? Like, I really want to bring back thou if we're going with what used to like always was and stuff. Like, I mean, if we're gonna be pronoun like purists, that's really the direction we're gonna have to take.
Pronoun purist. I bet Mayor Forstate is a pronoun purist.
Purist. I'm gonna start. If I ever end up in a conversation with her or one of those people, I'm just gonna start using thou and thy and thee in my sentences and be like, well, this is what you always wanted, isn't it? Going back to the original pronouns. But kind of my thought. Wanted. Yes.
Sorry.
Like going along with kind of what Katie is saying about how there is kind of a distinction between it and they. Like it sounds, if you're thinking of it singularly, yeah, I could see why it feels a little bit like that. But there's kind of an implied layer within the language that because let's say we're using the terms for plurals. Like if you're talking about a group of people and you talk about them as they or them, like as a group, you can still in that conversation contextually imply that this is a group of people and not a group of objects. Whereas you can still use the plural they, them for objects. Like I have a box of markers and they are on the table. Like I can imply that that's a group of objects and not a group of people. So I don't know if we necessarily need to spell out exactly whether or not it's a person or an object. And like, sure, maybe we could have that conversation in like evolving the language in that way if people want to use more distinct terminology. But I guess in English, we have that implication and we don't really see the need to specify. But I bet other languages are kind of like that. I know in Hindi, because I speak Hindi as a second language, and it's an interesting one with pronouns because the verbs are gendered. And so when you speak, it's funny because when I speak Hindi, I learned Hindi before I transitioned. So I have to change the way I speak Hindi because I sound like a woman when I speak Hindi sometimes. And I could easily out myself. But their pronouns for third person, they use like this person right here and that person over there. And it's the same thing for objects, like this object right here versus that object over there. And their pronouns are due to proximity and not by gender. So I would agree. I think this is more of a linguistics conversation, but I hope that helped a little bit.
What do you think?
It is. Thank you. Oh, yeah. It's really interesting. You brought up a couple of things there. I'm all on board with what you say. Actually, I think it makes perfect sense, and it's a limitation of the English language. But you brought up a couple of things there. I'm 3 weeks into learning the German language here, and one of the things I found scary is that there's three genders. There's three ways of saying he. So he, she, and it. And child is it in German, which I always
interesting.
It is interesting. But the other thing that I think must be quite difficult for non-binary people in German is the word for she is sie, and it's exactly the same word for they, which is sie. Right. And that must be quite difficult and must be a limitation in German. But of course, I don't know enough to be able to talk at any length about it. But it may be something I will look into as my knowledge of the language increases. But no, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I think that different languages have different problems with this. And it's not just for trans people. Like in English, we're kind of lucky that the only real battle we're having is over trans people's pronouns. Like if we had like French, for example, is highly gendered and there's only 2 genders. Mm-hmm. And if I don't know enough about French particularly to give examples of words, but if we just conceptually had some kind of language which was very gendered and it only had 2, or even if it had 3 genders, and you had all things like strong and big and like oxes and dogs and fighters and stuff were all gendered male, and everything soft and weak and pretty and pathetic was always gendered female, then that teaches people about what masculine and feminine are as things. And it's kind of this like feminist 100%. Argument of we're just labeling random things as if this belongs to men, this belongs to women. And even if you're like, oh yeah, anyone can do anything, but also when you do that, it is feminine, it puts some judgment on people, and it can control people. And I think that, French feminists probably have more of a challenge in that one sense than English feminists, because of our languages. And yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I'm agreeing completely. One thing I've noticed in my second week of German was learning about occupations, and every single occupation has a male form and a female form. Right. Every single one, and it was hard enough to get away from say policewoman and policeman to police officer for a lot of people. I can imagine in somewhere like Germany or France or wherever that's going to be even more difficult. It's
what could be
probably
even worse
a very different fight people have here. Sorry.
Yeah, if they had like the word policeman and then didn't even have policewoman, because like having policeman, a policewoman, a police person, and then you're like, well, why don't we just say police officer for all of them? If they only had like, because of the quirk of the language, policeman is a masculine word, so we don't just say policeman, but we also say like the masculine version of the when we say it. So like manly policemen or whatever, like every single time you reference them, then kind of fighting for this, like when you think of policemen, you should think of men and women and non-binary people, or even maybe a job less like police, but like engineer, where women are forced out of engineering because of like social prejudices all the way from early school up until the hiring and beyond in their career progression. If also every single time you talk about it, you're like specifically pointing out that it's masculine, it's very it could be very alienating.
Well, it's funny with that we even in English, I know in the US do that sometimes, even though we have like a more gender neutral job title. Like people will say like, oh, this person's like, you have doctor and you have female doctor and you have engineer and female engineer.
There's this brilliant Twitter account which basically tweets out like it's things from magazines and stuff, and it just flips all the genders. So sometimes you get things where it's like like, can a man have a career and children at the same time? Because they've just flipped it from some bullshit. But like a good one of those is whenever they mention sportsmen, they always say like, oh, I really like men's football, or I really like male sportswomen. So I think it's good to always call sportsmen male sportswomen.
I love that.
Yeah, that's cool.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I hope that was a good answer, and I hope you can go and enjoy your male men sportswomen football or whatever. I don't know.
whatever it is, trying to sort out the German language from the ground up, arguing with my teacher. I think it will be. Because that's all my second week has been. I don't think I'm very popular. Can I just say one last very quick thing before I go? It's literally one thing. directly to you, Ben. Ben, I really empathize with you on imposter syndrome. I've dealt with it every single day of my conscious life. I know what a fuck on the self-esteem it can be, and I hope you have people around you that are constantly telling you how awesome you are.
Well,
not
thanks.
me. I never tell him. I hate
It's
Ben.
not Katy. Katy tells me how much she hates me.
Well, that
like anytime I seem too confident. Anytime I seem too confident, Katy just shows up and she is like, "Yeah, don't get too cocky, mate."
Anyway, thanks a lot, Spencer. We're going to move on. So we have loads of callers. So
thanks.
Thank you.
Right,
bye. Right. So let's move on to. Let's talk to Will in Colorado, who wants to talk about transitioning with conservative parents. Will, what would you like to discuss?
I'm mostly just looking for advice.
Sorry, I'm being a bit slow-brained. Let's talk to Simon in Germany. We're having a Germany theme.
Germany Day.
Hello.
Simon, hello.
Can you
Would
hear
like
me?
to clear up some definitions? Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, so please, can you first give me definitions first? Okay, what is a trans person and how to make the definition?
What is a trans person?
Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, like
just
how,
you want
the
to ask
definition.
me?
Like every word needs a definition. What?
Yeah. There's a delay, Simon. Give us a second answering. So I guess I guess that usually with any kind of word, I'm just usually happy with a dictionary definition, at least as a starting point, and we can debate further. Like I think we can get into big philosophical arguments about what a definition is and what specifically entails. But I guess it depends on what level you're asking at. Like if you've never heard of a trans person before, I might say, hey, I'm an example of a trans person. I was born a boy and now I'm a woman. And most people aren't like that, because most people who are born boys become men. And then you could be like, oh, okay, I can't, like you have an example to give, but if you wanted some all-inclusive definition that includes everyone who's trans in the world and excludes everyone who's cis, then we'd have to have this big philosophical argument about, what technically, like, can you even have strict definitions and who is included and that kind of stuff. So what level, like, what is your reason for asking, I guess is my question.
Yeah, like I once got a definition, everyone who doesn't conform to gender roles, what I find pretty what's the word? Like I find it pretty bad, because if everyone who doesn't conform to gender roles is trans, then like Syndrome from The Incredibles said, if everyone is super, no one is, and that's the problem when you don't have
there's
strong definitions.
There's a problem with that definition, especially you see that being thrown around and used problematically against trans men, because there's this whole kind of stigma against trans men, especially among like some GC and like certain transphobic feminist communities, gender criticals. So the recent argument I've seen that I got engaged with was that being a trans man is inherently misogynistic, because it's women who just don't want to be seen as women, and they just think being a woman is so terrible, and they don't want to meet women's
gender roles.
But then also they'll say that well, you can be a woman and not follow women's gender roles, so why would you need to be a man? It's like, well, that's not the issue. I am against gender roles, and that is something that I had to work out for myself. Is do I want to be a man because that's who I am, or do I want to just not have the gender roles of being a woman, and do I not want the oppression of being a woman? And for me, it wasn't about the gender role. It was about I didn't like my body and the way I was engaging with society as a woman, but outside of the general aspect. So I think that the argument about it being gender roles absolutely is incorrect, and I think it's very problematic,
I wouldn't
especially
use that definition.
especially
the goal of feminism is that there are no gender roles at all. And so, I mean, and this is like something that some gender critical people argue, is that if we manage to create a world without patriarchy and without gender roles, then there wouldn't be any trans people, because if trans people are just reacting to sexism, and so if we didn't have sexism, we wouldn't have trans people, and that's just false. Like, I mean, my kind of response to that is, like, no one flies halfway across the world to get their genitals rearranged, but just because they like dresses. Like, that's just not how it works. It's just not a sensible response to anything. I would never use that anyone who doesn't conform to gender roles is trans, because another problem with that definition is gender roles change from culture to culture and place to place, and that almost suggests that if you like in England, there's not a strict gender roles as in Saudi Arabia, and that almost means that just by traveling to Saudi Arabia, lots of English people would become trans by that definition. So I'm not a fan of that definition. It is hard to give a definition. You often see someone who doesn't identify with their birth sex, but I mean, what does identify with? I mean, in a sense, I mean, it's kind of vague, isn't it? So I can understand why people. But this is the problem with trying to have one sentence to define an entire group of people, I guess. Sorry, Simon, you go on.
Well, like for example, like you mentioned transmedicalist, right? Right?
Potentially.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Is that okay? Yeah, like they define it like they need to have gender dysphoria, because my question is, what else would make you feel uncomfortable in your birth sex body that you alters to like appear like the opposite sex? If that's okay to ask.
It's not always dysphoria. Not everybody has problems with their body necessarily, but they have more joy out of having opposite anatomy. So it's not always dysphoria. Sometimes it's euphoria, and I know several people that experience that. I think Katy might have wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, I guess for me, I mean, I know that there's the kind of in the wider trans community at the moment, there's a bit of discourse going on about this, and I think for me, it's kind of like more of a definitions disagreement than anything else. There is some force within me, not some kind of supernatural force, but just part of my brain, part of who I am as a person. I know, part of who I am as a person, which means that I am more comfortable now that I have medically transitioned and socially transitioned than I was before, as a person in my relationships with people, in all situations, basically. And someone else might also feel that they would benefit from medical transition. And I could say, oh, when I looked at my old genitals and my old face and all this kind of stuff, it made me feel terrible. And someone else might be like, I don't really experience
like
that.
Dysphoric.
So, yeah. And someone else might say, I don't really experience that. I just think I'd be happier if I transitioned. And maybe that isn't how their brain interprets distress. They might be experiencing the same thing as me, but they would describe it differently. Or maybe they've experienced so many worse things in their life. This mild discomfort is nothing in comparison. Or maybe that's just not how they look at the world. They only see about how to make their life better, and they don't always consider the negatives. Or maybe I'm the kind of person who always gets stuck in my mind and catastrophizes everything, which is kind of true. And in that sense, we kind of are having different perspectives and maybe are trying to describe the same thing. But ultimately, if your life is going to get better from transitioning, like that's enough for me. I don't really care if you are suffering beforehand. If you go from suffering to not suffering, that is a win. But if you go from not suffering to being happier and still not suffering, then that's also a win. I get that some people suffer a lot. I get that some people suffer a lot and they go through a lot and they feel like, I worked so hard to get where I am. And now there are people who aren't suffering at all, just turning up and having an easier ride, and I don't like it. And I can't really empathize with that position, but I think, that's clearly a common human reaction. But I think it's being a bit selfish, and you should just be like, well, not everyone's experience of life is the same. And all we really care about, the whole goal of trans rights, is allowing people to be happier in who they are. And it's the same with gay rights. So, yeah, I just think that this argument over whether dysphoria was... Yeah, just in general. But I think that this argument about, whether someone needs dysphoria or not, I mean, what does that mean? Whatever reason someone is like, it's almost like we're having the argument about should someone want to transition in order to transition. It's like, who the hell is transitioning without wanting to transition? Like, that's the real argument we should be having, not about what the set of reasons are. If you want to transition and you're like, oh, well, I don't suffer today, then okay, well, is it going to make your life better? And if it's going to make your life worse, then don't fucking do it. And I know it's harder than that, but like that's basically what it comes down to, isn't it? Not whether someone experiences a certain distress or not. I don't know. Sorry, I'm in rant mode. Simon, go ahead.
If people gaslight someone to thinking they will be better, as like some people try to gaslight gay people out of the homosexuality, like from some Christian person, like trying to gaslight someone into a sexuality, even they are not that sexuality or transgender. Yeah. What's about them?
Yeah, for sure, there are some people. I mean, there's a very strong social pressure to be straight and to be cis. So that means to not be gay and to not be trans. People are like pretty much every trans person alive has been pressured to try and change who they are. And I think, the reality is that we know that pressure doesn't stop people from being trans. It holds them back. Like, so holds some people back years or even decades. But eventually...
Yeah, that's why... Sorry to interrupting.
That's okay. People... I guess there are people who live their whole lives without, coming out. But in most cases, people put it off and then it just gets too much for them and they come out. And I think that, that's when we're talking about this kind of hypothetical situation of someone being gaslit into being gay or into being trans. I mean, for sure, theoretically, you might have that. But the thing is, this kind of desire that people have to transition, whether it's gender dysphoria or whatever you want to call it, when cis people transition, they get a desire to transition back. And this desire gets worse and they gain gender dysphoria or they gain whatever we want to call it. And we know that from experiments, sadly. But I just think that this kind of, it just wouldn't work. You can't talk someone out of being trans and you can't talk someone into being trans. You could confuse them. You could make them doubt themselves. You could make them delay doing the right thing for a while. But I don't think that people will be tricked into being trans.
Like,
or out of it.
Yeah, like the probability to be trans is like 1%, like 1%, right? Like, I don't know the actual numbers right now.
Yeah, 0.5% or something, yeah.
Yeah, and if there is an increase like 44 times in a certain demographic, like not in the overall demographic of all people in the world, does that sound unnatural or unnatural, like the growth of 4,400%? If it...
Right. Ben, do you want to take this one, or then we'll have to move on? Oh, you're muted, Ben.
I missed it. Can you repeat that?
Simon is asking about. Simon is asking about whether it seems natural that there's been a 4,400% increase in trans people coming out.
Oh man, where to begin with this argument? Yeah, so I'm gonna give an example that's very similar to this, right? So there's multiple reasons why we might be seeing more trans people coming out now, and probably one of the more common reasons is that people feel safer to come out now. There are more resources for people to come out now. people are understanding what being trans is at an earlier age, so they're able to find out that they're trans sooner, as opposed to going most of their lives and saying, oh, I didn't even know this was a thing. Like for me, I had no clue what a trans person was until I was like in my teens. So like there are multiple factors at play here for that, but I want to use an example of chronic illness because this is one that you see within like the alternative medicine community trying to say, well, people are getting less healthy because look at this rise of people with chronic illness. And like, hold on a sec, like what factors are involved that would make this population increase? Yeah, they live longer. That's what happened. Is number one, more people are being diagnosed because they're not slipping through the cracks as much. They're getting a diagnosis. We have more imaging techniques, more screening techniques to capture those people who have these chronic conditions. And then we're also keeping them around in the population longer. So more people are existing with chronic disease because they're not dying as early as they would before. And that's potentially a reason why more trans people are existing right now, because unfortunately throughout history, trans people have not had a very long life expectancy, and now I don't know what the future is really going to hold, but we're seeing more trans people living into older adulthood, which is fantastic. I love to see that, but there's all those factors playing into this of why we're seeing this bigger number. And it's not just there are more now than there ever have been. Like that might be true, but look at each of the variables. What could make this number be skewed in a certain way, taking all that into account? So.
But when it's like on a certain demographic, like if you test for like some genetic dysfunction, for example, like or something in your genes, and you test more, you will see that's like in all population from 1 to 100 years old that it's rising. But if it's like in teenage girls that go into puberty, it's rising more than in all the other. Also older people realizing they are trans, or
well, you can do that. You can do that with almost any data you get. Like the greater sample size you get, you're gonna capture more people who are abnormal, right? Or like atypical. Like let's say if I'm rolling a 6-sided die, right, and I can roll it 3 times, and get maybe I get the number 1, I get the number 2, and I get the number 3. Like okay, cool. I haven't seen anybody roll a number 6. Like we're just not getting any number 6s. But then I keep rolling this die, and then oh man, like why are there so many 6s? And then I keep rolling, and wow, we have more 6s. But we also, number 1, didn't factor in the other numbers that we also rolled in that. But we're just fixating on. I've decided in my brain that I think that this number 6 is significant. So every time I roll a 6, I'm going to write down that I rolled a 6. I'm not writing down every other time I've rolled a 2, a 4, etc. But now I have this isolated sample of look, I rolled 30-something 6s in 100 rolls of the die, which like, yeah, okay, that might be significant, but it also might not be. How many times did I roll these other numbers? I don't know. Like what other variables are we missing in this equation to determine the significance of that statistic we got, right?
That reminds me of how did life come to life, rolling 6 6s in a row. That remembers me of that.
Yeah, I think that when people try to interpret stats, like number 1, I feel like the majority of people have not taken a stats class, because when you take stats, you understand that there's a lot more to probability than just a simple fraction or like adding fractions, whatever. Like it's very overly simplified. What goes into determining probability is pretty intense, and I think people are taking isolated stats and not looking at really what went into that statistic. How did they calculate it? Which is why anytime someone says, I believe this probability is true, I have to ask, how did you calculate your probability? Because if you cannot demonstrate to me that it is calculated correctly, I don't really buy into your stat to begin with. So that's, we could go on a whole soapbox about stats.
Yeah, especially when they're using percentages for something which has numbers in the hundreds. You know, there are in the UK of the year in 2019 when they came up with that 4,400%. number, the total number of kids being diagnosed and given the treatment for trans healthcare was less than 100. So, you know, you've always got to be suspicious. Anyway, Simon, I feel like you've got loads of good questions, and you should definitely call back. But we've got to move on because we've got other callers.
Yeah, I will. Anyway. See you next week. See ya.
Yeah,
great. I gonna need then go next week.
Thanks. Thanks, Simon. Right. Okay. So just a reminder, if you would like to send a super chat of $5 or more, you are totally welcome to, and we will read it out at the end. Ben's just magically disappeared, but I think we will take the next caller anyway. So I think we are going to... Right, let's do it. Let's talk to Wes in London, who wants to talk about Posey Parker. Come on then, Wes.
Yeah, good evening to you both. Now, obviously, she's been dominating the headlines. She's been causing a little bit of a Twitter meltdown in the last few days and weeks with a tour of Australia. And I think that the trans community, they just play right into her hands on every occasion. It's just so, the optics which I always see are just so absolutely terrible, because when you're talking about people who are actually fighting and struggling for their rights, they've been oppressed and so on, when you see her, she's just got a few women speaking. Her whole tour is about let women speak, and she's basically descended upon by a mass of people who are just screaming and shouting abuse at her. Now, if you used to ask who is the person who's been oppressed here and who are the oppressors, you think to yourself, well, it just doesn't look good, does it? And what she's done for her tour in Australia in particular, she's just really started a big conversation out there, because it's attracted a lot of media attention, mainly because of the activities of the people who are counter-protesting. So I'd just like to hear your take on that.
Yeah, I think that to some degree, the Posey Parker is good at two things, and one is being the center of attention, and the other is selling merch. And I am not going to knock her at either of those. She is better at both than me by a long shot. But she is good at, in one sense, she's kind of fearless, that she just walks in and says something, doesn't matter how extreme or stupid it is, and then people react to it. And the trans community is very reactive in the sense that we are constantly responding to, attacks on our rights and threats to our lives and stuff. And we aren't really making, currently this year, right now in the UK, aren't really making that much progress or really doing anything other than responding to attacks on us, which means we're in this position where, like you say, we kind of end up playing into people's hands, certainly when they're trying to build their own kind of personality or career or whatever. I think that to look at the media, obviously there are different media bubbles, but I feel like to look at the media cycle from the current Australia tour and to come away thinking that Posey Parker is being oppressed, or that the people shouting abuse are the ones shouting at her, is it'd be interesting to see what media articles you're reading, because I would say the main news items that she's had are her just shouting abuse at people on a microphone and swearing and saying the place she's in is the worst place she's ever been, and also the neo-Nazis showing up and doing Hail Hitler's right next to her little speech thing and saying that they were there because they support her message. I feel like they're the main things. But as a more general point, I think one of the biggest arguments of the gender critical movement is they're like, look, here is a woman, like a little short woman with a smiley face, and then there are all these men in black shouting abuse, and that is the entire argument based entirely on optics of this, the way I've described it. Whereas the important part, and I know that there's lots of different arguments here, but how I would say the important argument here is she's going around representing removing human rights that trans people need to live. She said loads of really disgusting things, like, men with guns should go into women's spaces to intimidate trans women, and trans men should be sterilized, for example. And, if she got her way, that would be, it would ruin mine and Ben's lives. And And then for the people who are turning up to protest, I mean, if you just go to, a hate rally with your face exposed, you risk being doxxed or, getting threats or all kinds of things. I mean, constantly people are taking photos from counter protests against, not just anti-trans stuff, but all kinds of stuff. And then they get, abuse online for it and stuff. And you can see why people are worried about showing their faces or whatever. But also it's it's important to kind of highlight how a key part of gender critical propaganda is it's women versus men. Like that is, they constantly say it. And if you go and look at what Posey Park has been saying about the people who oppose her, she has said that about all of them. She's saying, oh, it's women versus men, it's women versus men. And then when you look, the majority of the people who support her position in polls are men. The majority of the people who oppose it are women. Like when she got rushed in the one where the Nazis showed up, I can't remember, Melbourne, there was someone there who isn't a man, came up to the microphone, and at the time Posey Parker said, oh, I don't know who she is. And then by the time it got to the internet, an hour later, she was saying, a violent man attacked me. And then we see the footage and it looks like, in the picture, a man, her security guard, just strangling someone who most people would read as a woman from that picture. And like this has happened like so many times. This is like the propaganda versus the reality. I mean, there's a video of her I saw the other day where she's saying to a crowd and everyone's cheering, Posey Parker, you can't hide, you've got Nazis on your side. And she just, into the crowd, not anyone in particular, just says, you're a man, you're an ugly man, you're an AGP man. It's like, if you listen to the voices, the majority of voices here are women's voices. If you look at the crowd, the majority of the people there are women. She's good at propaganda. Yeah. She's better than me at propaganda. She's better than trans people at propaganda. That's her third skill.
Well,
if you think I showed up, she'd call me a man? Would she look out of the audience and call me a man?
I'll tell you what, you have a go, Ben, and I'll come back. Is that okay?
Well, I don't have a whole lot to add to this except for, I mean, this sounds like, I don't want to, promote this Katy Montgomerie online. She's terrible, but it's basically Katy shit cartoons. Like this is how it goes. Like you have a GC that says something extremely hateful against trans people, like advocates specifically to take away trans rights. And then the trans person says like, hey, you shouldn't say that. And then the GC is like, you're oppressing me. You hate women, like all that. Like it's exactly the way Katy's cartoons go. And I hate promoting Katy, but Katy might have something here.
If I could just chime in there, because what I find quite interesting, Katy, because you when you had that poll up and you was talking about this topic, you were saying it's not really right to be calling anybody who turns up at these meetings a Nazi and so forth and try to tar them by association. And I've seen a lot of that online. And a lot of who's been most guilty of that are the Australian politicians, because there's one woman in particular who is in Hobart. Her name is Cassie O'Connor. She put out a very, very ridiculous tweet. She said, the TERFs and the Nazis who spewed hate and goose-stepped in Melbourne yesterday are ideologically aligned with the murderers of Sarah Jacobson, her family, and 6 million other innocent people. Now, that to me is way over the top. So she's basically saying that if you're a woman who turns up at a Let Women Speak event, you're basically ideologically aligned with the murder of 6 million Jews. Now, that is a little bit extreme. And this person is actually an MP. So I'm thinking to myself, why would you, the standard of their MPs down there, first of all, is just really it's just absolutely crazy. You see what I mean? So when you have people like this basically saying, not Posey Parker, she says the TERFs and Nazis, she put those together. So basically any woman who basically just turns up, rightly or wrongly, and says they've got concerns about what's actually going on, you're ideologically aligned with the Holocaust, that is very inflammatory. And then when people who see Posey Parker, they think, so, well, what is she saying which is so inflammatory? People then drawn towards what she's actually saying. And then when they see people like this person, this Cassie O'Connor MP, making that kind of statement, they'll think to themselves, well, Posey seems quite reasonable here, and what this woman has said seems quite deranged. And that's fairly just sort of like, you know, it's self-defeating, isn't it? It's a bit of an own goal, making such an inflammatory statement.
You know, I to some level agree with you in that. I guess one of the problems of being a group of people rather than just one person is you have a range of people, and some people are going to come up with something ridiculous, and that's true of trans people and gender critical people. You know, of any group of people, and you have kind of a center position of your group's political views, and then you have people on either sides which kind of represent the extremes, and they're usually a minority within a minority, but they're the people who get highlighted, and that is again true for both trans people and gender critical people. And you know, I highlight wacky gender critical people all the time, and so you know, this could be, you say, an example of perhaps of a, you know, trans feminist or a trans person or just a pro-trans rights person saying something ridiculous. Maybe I haven't seen their statement. I'm not really going to comment on it without reading it.
Yeah, she's an MP. She's an MP for Hobart.
Yeah,
so she's not like just a random, you know, person on Twitter. She's an MP coming out with that.
And I think that you know, you're right in that one. I mean, this is kind of what happened with Trump, is that like he did say some absolutely garbage things, but a lot of what he said was just general incompetent rambling. And when people are calling him the second incarnation of Hitler, there were people who were like, well, I listened to one of his speeches and it was just kind of fine. Like, if you miss the dog whistles, you don't really know, you don't mind kind of incompetent rambling, you might be like, oh, it's kind of okay. And then that kind of, it can be used by the supporters of, you know, whatever movement, Trump's movement or Posey Parker's one, to say, look, everyone who disagrees with me is crazy, so you should disregard what they say. And then it stops people from arguing. And I totally agree that that is an unfortunate position. And I think it's something that is very hard to do right. And it's kind of something that, like, the left as a whole is worse at, because we have less media organizations, less money, less organized. And also, you know, our propaganda's worse. So it's very easy for them to do that and have it work as a strategy to point out and say, oh, look, here's a crazy person. They're an MP, therefore you should disregard all points for this. And my situation is, all I can really do is, personally, I can say my position and lead by example. And, you know, I don't pretend that I lead anything really, but hope that at least trans people around me who respect my view will see what I'm saying. And all I can really do is hope that people follow what I'm saying, or people like me, you know, show me what to say, or give me ideas. I'm not saying I'm blindly led, but I guess what I would say is that, and what I've tried to make clear early in the episode, is I don't think every gender critical person is a Nazi at all. I think that's a completely ridiculous claim. And certainly to say that someone who turns up to a Posey Parker rally is ideologically aligned with, like, you know, the death camps or something is pretty wacky. But what I would say is that gender critical ideology, like the mainstream average gender critical position, is politically compatible with republicanism, like the most extreme forms of American right-wing Republicans, and also the Nazis. And the reason why I say that is because they don't have an issue with it. They turn up to these rallies in support. They constantly are publishing on their little Telegram chats and stuff, you know, articles written by gender critical people with no comments, you know, no like, oh, this person's bad because they're a feminist, but at least they've said something good about trans people. They just like, yeah, this is a good article. And it's because, as I was, I'll just finish and then hand it over. That's because they, no, that's okay. It's because gender critical is, I think, a single issue thing, which is just anti-trans. And for sure, you know, you could say, oh, well, maybe the Nazis want death camps again and gender critical people don't want death camps. And that would be perhaps an ideological distinction, but I mean, that's not a very good one, because there were a lot of things before then that they do agree on. But yeah, you know, there are people absolutely who don't really know what's going on, and they turn up to these things and they're like, I don't want a man in a changing room with me. That is an okay position to hold. And then that Posey Parker says, there shouldn't be men in your changing rooms. And you're like, okay. And then the other side's like, you are Hitler. They'll be like, okay. Well, I think that I've heard enough here. I'm going to back Posey Parker. But maybe if they sat down in a room with me and I was, or not necessarily in a room, but if I was able to talk to them and explain, you know, what she's really campaigning for. I mean, she's been quite open about wanting to repeal the Gender Recognition Act, reform the Equalities Act so it doesn't have trans people in it, you know, remove Gillick competence, ban me from the spaces I use today. Suddenly it becomes a lot more clear where, you know, these positions are. And it's just, she has a bigger platform, she's better at it, and has more money. I mean, it's difficult. Anyway, I don't know if either of you have a comment.
Yeah, I thought I'd just come back on that because you've got the Prime Minister of the area, of Victoria, Daniel Andrews. When the Nazis turned up, now they basically turned up because they knew Antifa was going to be there, so they just came along and hijacked the event. And now because of that,
that's not the best excuse, though, is it? Because like, why were Antifa there?
Sorry.
Why would Antifa turn up? Why would Antifa turn up?
No, Antifa were there to protest the Let Women Speak event. And Antifa were there. You didn't see them waving the red flags. You never saw that.
I'm not saying they weren't there. I'm sure they were. there. I'm just saying, why would,
so what,
like, the Nazis did turn up to support Posey Parker.
No, what I'm saying is, Antifa was going to be there. So the Nazis turned up as well. And the point I'm making is the Prime Minister, Daniel Andrews, is basically linking the two together, i.e. the Nazis were there in support of Let Women Speak. Now, he's the Prime Minister.
So he's here's the problem, though. Like, we already kind of talked about this, though.
Any woman who turned up has been a Nazi. And it's not very helpful.
No, so we already talked in detail about this. But, like, the problem is that they turned up, but if a reasonable organization did not want to be associated with that Nazi presence, like, they could tell them to leave. They could come out and say something that they do not support this organization being there, and they do not they could do something about it instead of taking pictures with them and not doing anything about the fact that they were there. I think you can't say that, like, sure, you can say that they're officially linked, but they weren't trying to stop them from being there. They weren't trying to make them not be at this event.
I don't know if you saw the actual footage, because they turned up in black bloc, which is what Antifa usually do. They turn up in black bloc, first of all. And you're talking about predominantly middle-aged women. Now, if you've got some young, like 25, 30, young, fit men, you expect middle-aged women to go and fight them. I don't really expect them, I don't expect them to do that, because bottom line is they shouldn't have been there, and they were let through by the police. They shouldn't have been where they were.
Why are the anti-fascists?
To say they were invited along is ridiculous.
If anti-fascists and fascists are turning up to fight, why is it always happen that the anti-fascists end up being mixed in on the same side as LGBT people and feminists, and the Nazis always end up mixed in and on the same side as the gender criticals? I mean, for sure we can say, oh, they weren't invited, and some of the people here aren't fans of Nazis, or they're even actively opposed to Nazis. And we can just look at the ideologies. Nazis want a world without trans people in it. That is their goal. And they may have very extreme ways of talking about it and very extreme ways of achieving it. If you're some nice, middle-aged, middle-class woman who's never raises her voice and doesn't swear, and you also want to create a world without trans people, and you have a lot of money and power, and you're trying to achieve that, like, those are garbage views, and you're ideologically aligned in that sense, at least. Even if you're disgusted by the idea of them wanting to be racist or whatever, you're still trying to wipe out trans people, and that is why trans people come out to protest against gender critical rallies, and it's why Antifa come out to protest against gender critical rallies, and it's why the Nazis come out to support them. It's because of this It's like a core position.
Come on, I disagree. Come on, because I don't know if you saw, they actually put out a statement criticising Posey Parker for saying she's in favour of lesbianism, which is going to reduce the white population. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
So it's not like they were supporting her. They don't support her either. So you basically
they disagree with her on gay rights, maybe, though I'm not sure she's very good on gay rights. But they certainly disagree with the average gender person on gay rights.
A lot of the people she associates with are lesbians, so I don't really think she's anti-gay. A lot of her close colleagues are lesbians. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I don't know if you're aware of certain situations where, you know, they'll use
I have gay
certain
friends.
people like lesbianism and like lesbian and gays to promote being anti-trans. Like if you get to the bottom of things, like even bring in like I guess L Alliance and G Alliance now. LGBT Alliance. Like they're not. They still have some Alliance. Like. Well, I was just gonna say they still have like some anti-gay undertones. Like it's not.
Well,
they're kind of using
this
that.
Is what I was going to say. LGBT Alliance
to smuggle that in.
Are actively campaigning against a conversion therapy ban for gay people, not just trans people, not just saying we don't need this. Like they were actively campaigning against it. That's an anti-gay position by people who are gay.
I'm talking about Posey Parker. I'm not talking about LGBT Alliance or anybody else. I'm not talking about that.
She mixes with the gender-critical gay people who aren't pro-gay rights. I mean, they're all the LGBT Alliance types. Anyway, I feel like we were about to go off a tangent, and we do need to kind of move on.
It's not my.
Do you want to close my thought?
I don't know why I like to stay on point. You like to go off on a tangent. And just one last thing.
We're both good at tangents. Yeah.
Sorry. Just one very, very last thing. I don't know if you saw her event at Canberra, but she did let a trans activist speak. Is a female. Obviously, it's let women speak. That yet. And well, anyway, she asked the trans activist, should a man be allowed to change should a man be allowed in a women-only space with my 16-year-old daughter? And the trans activist reply was, well, statistics say that your daughter, blah blah blah. Then Posey said, okay, answer the question: should a man be allowed to be in a single-sex space with my 16-year-old daughter? And she just said, oh, you're very hateful. Now, until you can answer that question honestly, then people are just going to see that she's asking a very reasonable question, which you don't answer.
Yeah, it's a purposely trap question, isn't it? Because when she says, man, she means me.
Just say yes or no.
She means me.
Just say yes or no.
Sorry? Wes, she means me. If you asked the average person on the street, do you think I should be allowed to use the women's toilets at work like I do every single day? They'll probably look at me and be like, yeah. But if you say, a man with biological male DNA, by the way, have you considered how all rapists are men? Then like people are primed to be like, oh, okay. Well, who are you actually really talking about? Like there is a difference. And another core part of gender critical propaganda is to just pretend that trans women and cis men are identical groups, and then only talk about cis men when all they really want to do is change the law for trans women. Like it's a little bait and switch. And then when you say to someone, false dichotomy, it's like, right, answer me right this now. Do you think men should be able to watch my daughter getting changed? You're like, well, I don't want anyone watching your daughter getting changed. I don't think we should have changing rooms where adults and children get naked together unless they're related as family. Like,
that's the big elephant in the room, though, isn't it? Self-ID.
No,
also,
like, nothing to
even
do with
let's
that.
say, but even let's say this trans activist like answered the question in a way that wasn't the best way to communicate. Does that mean that Posey Parker is correct in her stance?
No.
Like, does one person not answering a question right mean that the whole trans movement is wrong? Like, this argument doesn't really stand.
It's quite. I just thought it's quite interesting. She didn't have any answer. She just was waffling and saying, "Oh, you're very hateful." I didn't think that was a correct response. That's all, and it's just quite indicative. Because what Kate was saying
quite indicative. Yeah. So you're saying this one person is indicative of the entire trans movement? Yeah. Okay.
Well,
I'll give you an answer, Wes. I'll give you the answer. My last thing before we let you go. My answer is, should a man be able to get changed in the room with my daughter? My answer is, I don't think we should have open plan changing rooms. I don't think trans women are men. Trans women and girls have got changed in women's spaces and gone to women's toilets for Posey Parker's entire life without issue. We don't want men in there either. I don't want a man watching me getting changed. That's why I don't go to open plan changing rooms and why I think we should get rid of them. And we don't have a problem today with men going in and watching me get changed. But what I have had before in my life is a man chase me into the women's toilets. A cis man who was being really creepy and like trying to touch me. And I ran into the women's toilets to hide and lock the door. And he came in and banged on the door and then like stormed out. Like anyway, I could rant off on that. But that's my answer. My answer is we shouldn't have open plan changing rooms and trans women are already there. And men aren't.
One last sentence from me. Well, the big elephant in the room is self-ID. That is the big elephant in the room.
No, it's
self-ID.
Right, okay. Well, we will talk to you again next week, Wes. Thank you very much. The big elephant in the room for the gender critical movement is that we've had self-ID in the UK always, and it has never been a problem, which is why we don't have any statistics from them showing why it's a problem. Anyway,
and obviously I belong in the women's bathroom according to all these people. I love how like they zoom in on this issue with men in the women's room. Not real discussion. But then you talk about someone like me and like, so you want me in there, and I look like a man, I talk like a man, I act like a man, and like
smell like a man.
Where I do smell like a man. Like, do you want me in there? Because that's what you're asking for.
Right. I think when did we start? There's a time zone shift. It's throwing me off. I think
51 minutes to do that. Like, what a fucking loser.
And then even talked about worrying about getting flaccid. Well, anyway, we should probably stop talking about it. Maybe can we cram in one more? No, I don't have energy to do the last three. I'm sorry, everyone that's on the line. No. Please do call in another time, a week when we haven't had, when I haven't had such tech issues and blah blah blah. Anyway, so that was our last caller, Wes. Thank you very much for having no one in between that we didn't have to delete. We're about to do super chats, so this is your chance. If you would like your very cool and fun message read out live on air, now is the time. And we're about to have Arden expertly transition us over. Very exciting. This is like an all trans show now. We've disposed of Jimmy. He's in a basement somewhere, tied up. Yeah. Ben, do you want to go first or second?
Well, the first one's about metal and for you, so I feel like you should go first.
Okay. $9.99 from Mike B. It's an upside down 666. Oh, thanks, Mike. Bang your head. Hashtag metal. Hashtag Team Katy. Yes, Mike. Excellent. Thank you very much. I listened to Harakiri for the Sky's new album today. It's very good. Next.
$4.99 from Steven. Seven Lions. Katy, Ben, and Arden, what are your favorite ice cream flavors? My favorite, Ben & Jerry's One Love no longer exists. Hashtag Team Katy. Hashtag go fuck yourself, Jimmy. That's my team all day, every day. Hashtag go fuck yourself, Jimmy. I like all ice cream, but I'm also a human trash can. But I think probably if I had to pick like my absolute favorite, I really like chocolate ice creams. But I think Rocky Road's pretty good because then you get like the chocolate ice cream and you get like the crunch and you get the marshmallow. But also, I guess, can I have two? Because I love ice cream. Yeah, cookies and cream is also a great ice cream flavor. So I'm gonna have them both.
My favorite ice cream that I always get when I go to an ice cream. Do you have ice cream vans in the US? Is that or is that a British thing?
We've got some in Austin.
Okay, they like drive around with a really distorted like kids tune, and people come out and spend $17 on a single ice cream. Yeah, okay, cool. Well, whenever I get in a situation where I have to get something from that, I always get an exotic Solero because that is the best one. I like the fruitiness. Anyway.
When I go to England, because I'm going to England, we're gonna go find an ice cream van, and you're gonna let me experience this.
Have you not had one? Have you not been to an ice cream van?
Oh, I have, but I think the things we have are different in our ice cream vans.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, they must be different.
Yeah.
Anyway, Celeros are proper good. €5 from Sale. Love you all, Team Lashko. Oh yeah. So Lashko is one of Slovenia's like national beers, and I think that I've probably talked to Sale in DMs. I think there was some conversation about Slovenia, and they messaged me to say, "Oh, I'm from Slovenia." And then my little cool Slovenian flex to any Slovenians watching is, I was in the advert for Lashko, because one year one of their Lashko adverts was filmed at Metal Days in Slovenia, and it's just this little clip. It's like cuts through really quickly of all these different metalheads like floating down the river and which are all drinking Lashko, and there's this like 3-frame clip of me and some of my friends being like, "Wee!" and we all had a beer, and I looked really bloated because I'd been drinking too much beer because they were giving out free beer. So, because I usually try and avoid it, drinking it all the time. But anyway, so there you go. Hashtag Team Lashko. I think that's the point for me. So.
All right, I guess we'll just accept that that's point for Katy. I'm not sure. I'm totally convinced. I think she's maybe cheating the system, but...
What's your beer? Come on, someone could hashtag your beer.
Oh, I love the local IPAs. Mwah.
I love IPAs. Any hashtag IPA
is... I'm not an IPA person.
That's a vote for me then. Hashtag IPA. Yeah.
I'll take any European lager. Like Lashko.
$5 from Melissa. I've asked a GC to prove men are using women's facilities, and she gave me examples of sexual assaults. She didn't like it much when I asked if, and there's a second part, if she thought sexual assault counted as using women's facilities, and if said facilities were for the purpose of committing sexual assault. Hashtag Team Feline.
So there is something that like gender criticals will do. They love this like bait and switch thing. Mm-hmm. They'll say something like, all trans women are predators because any man who uses a woman's space, that doing so is predatory, and saying as all trans women use all women's spaces, that means they're all predators. But that obviously isn't what being a predator is. Even if you believe that trans women are men, it's still clear that they suffer misogynistic sexism, and they've been using women's spaces as that issue your entire life, and not causing a problem and not sexually assaulting people. And when predators do want to go into women's spaces, they just fucking do it. So they're not going to be stopped by any law banning trans women. And being a predator is things like sexually assaulting people or perving on people or intimidating people, none of which a trans woman is doing by doing a we. So it's all just like, they love conflating things. It's like when they call trans healthcare mutilation, and then they say, "Do you like mutilation? Yes or no?" It's like, well, no, I don't like mutilation, but I know what you're setting this up for is to say, "Oh, great, so you don't support trans healthcare, neither do I." End of conversation. It's like Posey Parker's question earlier. Do you think a man should be watching my daughter get undressed? No, I don't think anyone should be watching your daughter get undressed. I don't think we should have communal changing rooms. Trans women aren't men. I don't want your daughter watching me get undressed. Like, what are you talking about? It's a fucking garbage situation all round. But yeah. $5 from Lost Fan. Hello. Question for some folk. Trans has become a fetish, porn category, etc. Is it harmful that some consumers reduce gender ID to a fetish? I think trans people haven't become a fetish, but if anything, we're climbing out from being a fetishist. Like, most people's only understanding of trans people is as of sex objects, and that's been... that was part of what put me off transitioning. I was like, I'm not some sex toy, and I'm not some kind of... I don't even really care about sex that much. And it's just not me. If all trans people are like sex freaks and I'm not interested, and then I was like, oh, they're not. They're just normal. So yeah, I think we're still escaping that. And yes, it is harmful. It's harmful to treat anyone as a fetish, not just trans people, gay people, and all different groups get it too. Women get it, for example. It's harmful for them too. So
also, since we're getting a Team Ben here, I just wanted to say we haven't decided on what the punishment is between you two, the brawl. So y'all got to sort that out.
The punishment is I have to talk to Ben again if I lose.
Yeah, well, apparently food challenges aren't bad enough for me because I literally drank onion water on this show, and I was criticized for not making enough of a face. Which, okay, I have to give some like. So when I did it on the show, the onion water was only like 1 day old onion water, so like it's only soaking for one day or something. And it wasn't that strong yet. It's literally, I put half of an onion in a mason jar filled with water and let it sit there. It's like lemon water, but with onions. It was for my top surgery fundraiser because I had like my last one not too long ago, and I did a hot dog eating contest with myself, and then drank onion water for every time I couldn't eat any more hot dogs. And that was like 3 day old onion water, and it's a huge difference between 1 day and 3 days for the onion water. It was absolutely nasty. So if anyone has any, I mean, I can make some type of weird water, but I feel like Jimmy would be like, you don't make enough faces. So maybe I need to do a not food challenge, do something different.
Okay, I still need to play Matt at chess. We need to organize that still. Yeah, I'm really bad at coming up with challenges. It's not a skill I have. We always are like, hey, Katie, think up of a challenge in the middle of the show. Like, I don't fucking know, mate.
Well, we probably should be better at doing it beforehand. I know Josie and Naomi and I all did you have to guzzle liquid vegan cheese. That's the punishment. Oh, yeah.
It's so disgusting.
It's a good one. I won't criticize you for not making enough faces, Ben. I promise.
I don't know.
We didn't actually read out the last one, by the way.
Didn't? Oh, we didn't. $4.99 from Clayton Smith. Happy Atheist Day. # Team Ben. And happy Atheist Day.
Is that today?
It is Atheist Day.
Day after my birthday. And a little green circle. I didn't know you could do that. $20 from Rose Red R10. Was on the line, but lost my nerve. Oh, I'm sorry, Rose, that we ended up taking 2 fucking joke callers and didn't manage to get to you. I identify as non-binary and use she/they, but I feel like I use the she part for other people's convenience rather than for my own comfort. Just wanted some thoughts and advice. Yeah, I think that a lot of trans people's existence ends up being to avoid abuse from cis people, to avoid causing a problem. I mean, that's kind of why a lot of trans people do just fit into the gender roles, because in a sense, you get more abuse for breaking gender roles than you do for being trans, in some cases, if you pass. So, I wouldn't feel guilty for it, and I would work towards having a kind of fuck you attitude and just being like, well, the people who care are going to put the effort in and everyone else isn't. Fuck them. If you can. But do call in.
$5 from Some Girl 67. French speaker in the US. I was taught pronouns il, masc, and elle, femme, and yel, NB, which was invented by NBs. Thank you for what you do. # Team Dr. Ben. Heart. I got another vote. I got 2. We're getting there.
And that's where you should finish.
That's where we should stop.
$10 from Amit Matthew. Have either of you heard of the Hawkeye Initiative? It's quite entertaining. Team Ben, but in Hindi. How do you say Team Ben in Hindi?
I actually don't even know how to say Team Ben in Hindi. I should do some homework. But Amit and I talk with Amit sometimes in Hindi, and it's a fun time.
I haven't heard of the Hawkeye Initiative. Google says, how to fix every strong female character pose in superhero comics. Replace the character with Hawkeye doing the same thing. I guess Hawkeye's a man, is he? I don't know anything about superheroes.
I don't know the comics, but that's what they did in the MCU. The next Hawkeye is a woman doing the same exact thing.
Okay, because like when I've searched for it, there are lots of like really underdressed men in really weird outfits in really extreme bendy poses. So I guess that's like they're pointing at how ridiculous super women, is that the right term? I don't know, superheroes who are women are treated by comics. Good idea. Ben.
I think I'll mine.
Do it.
No, I got it. $20 from Trent Oliphant. I see the anti-trans crowd using Sweden and other countries' pullback of treatments for minors as evidence that we need these laws. What do we know about those law changes, and how can we address those arguments? # Team Katy.
Yeah, so I actually did an interview recently with a journalist about this. Like lots of these are kind of where, like, we had the one in the UK where they just got lucky with a court case, and then all of the others based their anti-trans positions on that, and then ours got repealed, but it didn't really matter because then they already had the momentum and like the foundations to build some other stuff, and then some American states started banning it, and then other places point at them, and it's like all House of Cards all relying on each other, and they're like fucking garbage Lisa Littman study and stuff. But also there's sometimes the I didn't want to say language barrier because I think that's not quite true, because you can usually find, Swedish and Finnish people are usually perfect English, but it's a different political sphere and things get warped in the reporting. I mean, often you see Americans reported on things from the UK and you're just like, what the hell is this? It doesn't represent the situation at all because they're not on the ground. But when it comes to like particularly, particular countries like Sweden and Finland, in these cases, we've just got to ask and have a look. Are there anti-trans activists involved? Are they actually following the science? Have they actually banned it? Because there was something in Norway where all the anti-trans groups declared that Norway had banned healthcare for trans kids, and then it turned out they were actually just closing down private providers, which was just 2, and they were still doing the state provider stuff, and that's just because Norway only has state-provided healthcare. So often it's like little propaganda things like that. My understanding is that the Finland clinic was originally just run by someone who was just openly anti-trans and never wanted to do it in the first place, and has managed to get enough political momentum to shut it down. And like the idea of an anti-trans person running a trans clinic, just that might seem wacky to people, but it's almost the norm. Like we had that in Canada with Zucker and Blanchard for like years. So yeah, I think it's something where a lot of research is needed, and I'm not enough of an expert on Sweden or Finland to comment further than what I have. So I should have to do some more research. Talking to Swedish, is this me or you? I can't remember who read
it's one. You. I read the last one.
200, thank you very much. Swedish Corona from Puck Tholander. I think people who have a hard time with gender-neutral pronouns really have a hard time understanding non-binary gender identities. Those who get what it means to me to be gender fluid always use the correct pronouns. Team Ben. Yeah, I think that lots of it is that. You see it like sometimes conservatives are right. I'm never going to call anyone they. I'm always going to call them by the pronouns of the sex of their birth. And it's like, well, you literally just called them they in your own stupid rant because it's normal English. Yeah. Next.
$5 from Lost Fan. Ancient Jews Talmud authors describe 8 genders that a person could manifest. It's interesting how long we've known about gender as a social thing. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I've heard some. It's interesting. The arguments that I've heard about this particular point have kind of ranged across. Like some people have said that the interpretation that they're 8 distinct genders versus different sex categories is interesting. And I honestly don't know enough about that social context to really weigh in on this one. I know there's a lot of debate about it.
I'd love to talk to an expert in this.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great. If there's any scholars of ancient Jewish writings out there, call in. £25. Thank you very much from Jackie Greenland. It's my birthday today. Oh, happy birthday. So I'm sharing the love. -1 year till 50. Gosh. Also, happy birthday to Katie for yesterday. Hashtag I hate mayo. Yes, Jackie. Well, extra happy birthday for your fight against the slime.
Also, I forgot to give Ben a point, so sorry. That's one for each of you.
Oh, hey. We still have to get to 25 in order to get us to do anything at all. So, £25 from Jackie Greenland. Also, a question that's UK-centric. Do you think people would still support the current GRC position if they actually had to experience jumping through the hoops themselves, having just submitted all the paperwork myself? Obviously, I can't really answer this.
I don't, other than, the big irrational dickhead gender critical campaigners, I don't think anyone would support the Gender Recognition Act as it is today if they knew what was involved and what it got you. Genuinely, I don't think anyone would. I think if I sat down with unless you're like a fucking brain rot Graham Linehan posting trans people are pedophiles 24/7, unless you're that level, even if you're like pretty gender critical, I think if you actually sat down and went through my reports that I had to submit and saw what it got me, you wouldn't support it. That's a challenge, by the way. If you've got like some kind of your own show and you're kind of like, I'm not so sure about trans people, what about the Gender Recognition Act? Have me on. Let's go through what I had to do and what I get, and I'll change your mind, guarantee, because it's fucking ridiculous. Yeah. Next.
This is for you.
$30 Canadian from Kathleen Moncrief. I said that wrong, sorry. Love what Kate said about accessing gender-affirming care if it's going to make your life better. We don't wait for people to be in life-threatening distress to offer any other medical care. Why should this be any different? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's like... it's the same with all medical care. There are some things where it's gated for various reasons, but even then, imagine if we said, you're not allowed a paracetamol until you have, a headache so bad that it's causing you mental anguish. Maybe you want to have a paracetamol before that happens so it doesn't get to the point where you're struggling with your life.
Right. Yeah. And Kathleen's she's a physician as well, so I'd actually love to have a conversation with her. But I mean, it's like there's a reason why, take, for example, cardiac arrest. There's a reason we treat somebody before they go into cardiac arrest. The whole ACLS algorithm saying, if you see them in a wacky heart rhythm, you should probably treat them as if they're a code now, because we'd rather do it now than when they're already dead. So it's no, we can't just wait for someone to die before we're going to try to resuscitate them. You could apply this across the board medically.
Well, yeah, for sure. Wow. Goodness. How much is
it's
that?
Actually $25-ish in the US,
wow.
I think.
Yeah, £90. Amazing. Thank you. That's very kind. It's Naresh. Yeah, we love Naresh on this channel. So 500 Czech koruna, I think, for Naresh. Not feeling up to watching live, but I'll see the whole episode tomorrow. That's good because the bullshit will be edited out. Thanks for doing things to make a better world for everyone. Hopefully watching tomorrow will help my mood not sink this low again. Oh, I'm really sorry, Naresh. I hope that watching this has cheered you up, and if it hasn't, then I hope that you can cheer up afterwards by watching something. Fuck you, Jimmy. Or if Arden JS is here, pass it along. Fuck you, Arden.
Thank you so much.
See, Arden's taking the place of the seat of a person that we told to fuck off. $10 from James Call. Did I hear SDB say 24 days left? Close. It's 27. Well, 27 plus or minus a couple days, because I'm on radiology this next month, and I might end earlier. I might end on the actual Friday of that week. My official, thing from the dean's office says last date of attendance is April 19th. So that's what I put in, was the official last date of attendance, but that might change. So hopefully it'll be earlier than that. Cue the song Final Countdown by the cheesy late 80s band Europe. Congrats, future Dr. Venus.
I've seen Europe, it says live.
Venus, but hashtag Mayo rules the world. And that's for me.
No, disgusting.
I will accept it.
So we're at what? It's 14 until a punishment has to happen. I think one of you should do like a karaoke parody about how much you love the other person. That would be really funny.
That's off limits.
This is after I just sent like both of you a message like in DMs about how I'm getting my voice back finally, at least my singing voice back finally after being on T. My range like narrowed a lot, and then I've had to really work on extending it out again, and I think I'm getting my vibrato back, and I'm like, hell yeah. It's still gonna take some work. We're not there yet, but it's coming.
Okay, well, you better think of something, because we are about like a little over 10 super chats left to go, so people better get those votes in if you want it to happen. Not all of them that are left have votes, so we don't have enough yet, but
$20 from Under the Thunder. That's a good name. Tried to call in, but did so way too late, and all the lines were taken. We had a lot of calls today. I'm the American trans girl who's planning on going to uni in the UK, who was going to ask Katy for advice. We'll try again next week. Oh, yeah, I think we spoke on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, I think that generally the UK is quite a safe country. I mean, bit of a... I don't know. I was going to say at least we're not going to have a mass shooting, but that feels like a bit of a heartless dunk. I don't know.
You're not wrong, though.
I know. We shouldn't really be laughing about it. Yeah, you know, the UK is quite a safe and pleasant country, even though we've got this kind of horrific amount of transphobia in the media. We still have decent trans rights, even though the head of the left-wing party is probably likely to take over in 2024 or 25. So maybe when you get here, and he has today said something garbage about trans rights. He's not that bad. Probably while he's in charge, nothing will happen. So the trans panic might have died down by the time he's out of office in 10 years. All right. But yeah, still call in. Yours, Ben.
Oh, this is a sad one. 1999 from Ramona. I had to put my cat down last week. She was 18, and the grief is extreme. Combined with my stress from the state of trans rights, I'm a wreck. Any tips on how to handle personal grief with anxiety about our rights? Hashtag Team Katy. I hope you have somebody that you can talk to, because you shouldn't have to go through this by yourself. And I don't think it's healthy to go through by yourself. And while I can say all of the, you know, typical sentiments about how grief is normal, which it is, you should grieve, but like that's kind of diminishing, I think, the effect that this has on you. And kind of the most I can say really is I hope that you have somebody to help you process this, because I really hope you don't have to do this by yourself.
Yeah, I think like I can handle the stress and anxiety from worrying about trans rights. Like it's usually at about 9 out of 10 of my tolerance level, like all the time. Sometimes it goes down to 8 or even 7, but it's most of the time at 9, and it often does get up to 10. But when something personal happens, it just jumps straight up to like 15 or something every single time, and I just burn out. And I think pretty much every burnout I've had has been when there's been some garbage trans rights stuff, which is all the time, and I've been hovering at a 10, and then some minor personal issue has happened, and it's just added like 1 or 2 layers of stress and pushed me over into breaking point. It's very difficult. I think what is helping me now, I'm a bit more experienced with dealing with trans rights stuff. I mean, I guess I've been doing this since 2016, so that's like 7 years now. So I'm still a total noob compared to a lot of trans rights activists, but I am starting to realize that not everything that looks like it could happen is going to happen, and that gives me some kind of sanity. In the UK, there's not any major things overhanging right now. They maybe learn out something tomorrow, but like right now there isn't, and you don't have to be aware of every single thing. And just take time out for yourself. I would get off Twitter. I would stop reading the news. I would absolutely dive into like your favorite show, or like I often watch mindless stuff on YouTube. At the moment, I'm watching loads of Pokemon cards videos because I'm obsessed with Pokemon cards. But it's like so non-political that Yeah, just dive into something like that and let yourself heal up before you look at politics again. $5 Canadian from Magma. I really like your makeup today, Katie. Oh, thank you. I actually did it in a mad rush because the time zone difference, so I spent about 6 minutes on it. That was a Team Katie.
$10 from James Call. Katie just noticed the pendant. Is that Poppy? Yeah, she talked about it at the beginning of the show.
It is. It's a hand embroidered pendant from my sister-in-law for my birthday. $10 from Madison. How about eating the peel of a lemon for a punishment? I would vote against Katie for that one, but today I'm Team Katie. So I would. That is something I could do, and it is more disgusting than you think. I had a challenge in my uni to eat an entire lemon, including the zest. And oh man, after you're about halfway through, it's vomtastic. Like I never achieved it.
I support lemon peel challenge. That sounds great.
I feel like it's not bad enough, but I'll do it. I'll do it.
Wait, have you eaten a lemon before though? It's worse.
No,
than you think.
I mean the whole lemon would be bad, but just the peel, would not be a problem. Lemon.
Well, I got to the point where, like the pith and the juice was like an oasis from the horror of the zest, and I was like on the border of throwing up, like involuntarily, not out of disgust, but just like physical reaction to the too much peel in my stomach. So maybe it's harder than you
Arden
think.
and I have both already burned our mouths off with warheads. So
yeah, my tongue was like literally bleeding.
Yeah, when I say like burned, literal burning, like, and that's what Arden and I both had that, and Jimmy's like, it's not that bad, like I can eat like 200 of these, like we were actually suffering. So
yeah, he literally didn't believe that my tongue was bleeding, and I was like, when I went to bed that night, I confirmed. I was like, I want to make sure it wasn't just red coloring. No, it was blood. My tongue was bleeding.
Yep. Yeah, it was a great time.
I'm getting flashbacks to trying to eat a lemon.
$9.99 from Louise Richardson. # Team Katie. I will abstain from mayonnaise for the rest of the day, but it's okay in BLTs, chicken salad, tuna salad, etc.
Fuck off, Louise.
Just give up mayonnaise for
How
Lent.
many more meals are you going to have today? 5?
Maybe I'm a hobbit. You don't know me.
$5 Australian from Jackie Andronikos. Just tuned in as I woke up in Australia. Oh, wow. You're having all the fun at the moment. I'll have a listen back. Suspect there'll be inevitable Australian discussion with PP and Nazis. # Team Katie. Love all of you, though. Yes, you won't be disappointed.
Oh, yeah, there is that. $100. Wow, from The Wandering Toe. Much love. Best show on the line. Hell yeah. Thank you so much, The Wandering Toe. And I have to agree with you that this is the best show on the line. Everyone else can fight me.
So I'll tell you, there are not enough votes to hit the overall 25 right now. So
you want to see Benny a lemon? Come on, guys.
Yeah, if you want to get this lemon challenge on the road.
He was like, it's not even bad. It's not even bad. It's so easy. Like, I'm telling you, it'll break me. But
I think the whole lemon would. I think the whole lemon would be hard. No, I only said that the peel wouldn't be that bad if it was just the peel. But the whole lemon, I think, would be miserable. So, yeah, but I'll do it if that's what the audience wants, if we get the votes.
$5 from Borealis Phoenix. I am a Montgomerie as well, and I am a trans woman. It feels like I got family support when I see you. Oh, I don't really want to ruin it by saying Montgomery with a Y is the evil version, so I won't say that.
£5 from Abigail Mack. Just a note to say thanks to Katie. Following Katie's account really helped me get over my internal transphobia, and now I'm 2 years on HRT and happy. I'm really happy that you're happy, and that's amazing. But I mean, I guess Katie is okay. At best, Katie's okay.
Another innocent cis. Converting the world. My evil plan is coming to fruition. Great,
I also
Abigail,
just realized I didn't get the chat poll out, so I apologize. Let me get that rolling.
Arden.
I know I'm a
worst
failure.
producer we've ever had.
Yeah, worst one.
Well, the worst trans producer we've ever had. We can hear you typing now. Come on. Turn the microphone off.
Fuck you.
$9.99 from Avery at least. Happy Atheist Day. Also, hail to my fellow Satanists. Yay! And you've got a red dot.
Great.
What is this red and green dot? I didn't know you could send dots.
The green dots because the atheist green circle, I guess, is a thing going around on National Atheist Day. I don't know if the red is for Satanists, maybe.
Hail Satan.
$4.99 from Ramona. Had to stop watching because I'm leaving for work, so I'm sure your answers were very helpful. # team birthday girl. I guess it's fine. You know what? Yeah, you can give Katy votes for her birthday. You know, it's fine. It's fine, I guess. I guess it's acceptable.
Ben's just lining up for his birthday in like a few months where he's going to come in and slam at 100 points and make me
my birthday's in July when I start. My birthday is literally like the first week of my official start of residency. So I will probably be working like nonstop, inhumane hours on my birthday is my guess.
Well, disappointing. Just like this super chat, which is also disappointing. $4.99 from Avery at least. Hail Mayo. # Team Katy. Oh, what
These are contradictory statements. These are.
Yeah. Mate, you're like flipping. Oh, no, I was going to make a hyper online reference then. I was going to say you're like EJ Rosetta supporting the gender criticals and then saying, I support trans rights. Pick a side. Anyway,
69. Oh, it's you. Okay.
Nice. Okay, 69, double nice. Swedish Corona from Robin Taustig. Today I asked my 2 cats who to vote for. They told me to vote for the cat owner. As always, a great show. Yay! Thanks.
I feel like this is biased.
We've got 3 more super chats. All of them do have a vote, but we need 6 to get the thing. So even with the poll, we're not going to get there right now. So get in your team votes, because I want to see one of these losers eat a lemon. It's going to be hilarious.
Go suck a lemon. I think more fuck you Ardens.
I think there should be a future challenge. And this is dependent though on my ability to make this happen. But I think it'd be absolutely hilarious if for a future punishment, if I had to try to play a song on the guitar for Katy.
That'd be great.
I love that.
What would I do in response? Really. Wait, what instrument do you play? Saxophone or trumpet or something?
I play saxophone. I play like a bunch of wind instruments, but the saxophone's my favorite.
All right, I should try and get a hold of obtain a saxophone. Maybe be able to rent one, and I'll play.
Yeah, I think you'll probably rent it. Yeah, obtain a saxophone and play a song. That'd be hilarious.
All right, I'm well up for that as a punishment. That'd be a really fun one. Yeah. And it'd be embarrassing too.
$4.99 from Sanguine Sonder. Hoping this will help make up for some of the Nazis you had to deal with today. I appreciate the show and all you people do. # Dr. Venus. Thank you for the support. And Venus will never go away. That's forever. Forever staying,
I'm sure it's edited out of the show for those watching back. But it is kind of funny how we had 2 discussions about why gender criticals are supported by Nazis, and then 2 actual Nazis call in to attack trans people. Like, kind of making arguments for us. Anyway, thank you. $5 from James Call. Whole lemon. # Team Ben. Oh no. You better not turn off a comeback.
This is fun though.
We are just 4 votes away and only 1 more super chat, people. Come on, get your votes in. What the heck? I want to watch them eat a lemon. It's going to be so funny.
Everyone
not them, just Ben.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would enjoy seeing both if you eat a lemon, but...
Right, if we get to 75 votes, Arden has to do it too. We'll all do it.
Oh, yeah. Deal. Because if we get to 50, it's both of us. 75 for Arden joining in. I agree with this. Yes.
Okay.
$5 from Under the Thunder. Forgot to add apathetic on Mayo, but still hashtag Team Katy. I do disagree with her on new metal, though, but that's because I have terrible taste in everything.
Evidently, like I think there's probably a correlation between people who like new metal and people who like mayonnaise. That's probably a.
So Ben won the poll in the chat, but that leaves us only at 23. Is that? I can't do math, even basic math. What the fuck? Yeah, 22, 23. All right. Well, that was the last super chat, everyone.
Have 2 votes come in, anyone? Is it a possibility?
I might be spared. I might be spared this week.
Perhaps.
Spared from eating a lemon. What a disappointment. I got to wake up in like 4 hours and I had sat through this whole show and now I have to go to sleep knowing that Ben doesn't even have to eat a lemon. Like, what a disappointment.
What a waste of a show.
Yeah. What was the point of me even being there? Goodness sake. But anyway, thanks everyone for watching the show. Sorry about the interruptions. Sorry about being grumpy at the start. I think I've chilled out a little bit. I hope it didn't come across too much.
Now she's more grumpy because I don't have to eat the lemon. So thanks for making Katy angry again.
My grumpiness has gone back up. It's like a U shape. But we got another one.
There's
$5 from some girl 67.
Sorry.
I didn't realize Arden was here too. Hashtag Team Dr. Ben. 24 votes.
One more. We have it.
There we go.
Right, end of the show.
$5 from James Call. Did 4 years of college with an alto sax scholarship. Hashtag Team Ben. Hell yeah, alto's great. I prefer tenor because my tenor sax is like literally half my size. It's huge. But yeah, it's fun. Thank you for the support, and I guess I have to eat a lemon now.
Yay! Right, cool. Let's close the show down before anyone gets any more votes. Thank you very much, Ben, for being a loser. I mean, a good loser. No, thanks, Arden, for producing. Thank you very much to the Call Screeners and to the mods in chat. And if you'd like to help out, email the channel somehow. I can't remember what the email is, so you can look it up, I'm sure. And we'll see you all next week, where I will be back with mystery guests. Bye, everyone!